KTCU FM Fort Worth. You've made it to the end of another long work week. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a few guys talking sports for the next hour. This is Friday Night Sports. Here's Ben Otten, James Flowers, and Mitchell LaFave.
What's up, guys, and welcome to Friday Night Sports. I'm Ben Otten, and alongside me are James Flowers and Mitchell LaFave. What a wild weekend we had in college football. Caused a huge shakeup in the top 25. We'll get to all that, as well as talk some baseball as we get closer to finding out the World Series matchup. The NL team has already been decided. The Los Angeles Dodgers will be taking on the winner of the Houston Astros or the New York Yankees. But first, it was always going to be an interesting night in college football when there are two games going on Friday the 13th that include top 10 opponents. And they did not disappoint. A couple of major upsets. Starting with number 2, Clemson, was just stunned by Syracuse, 27-24, and then number 8, Washington State, blown out at Cal by a score of 37-3. Of those two upsets on Friday night, guys, which one had a bigger impact on their team's college football playoff hopes?
Yeah, I think in this case it really hurts Washington State the most because they had the most to lose. While they do come out of a Power 5 conference, they were not the favorite to win the Pac-12. Washington State was really on the outside looking in all the way, while Clemson had their way in. If they win out and win the ACC, will they get in? Yeah, probably, with just one loss. It kind of depends what the teams in front of them do. But I think the Washington State loss really hurts their chances for the college football playoff.
Yeah, I got to agree with you, James, on that one. Washington State, they're already at 8. They're still trying to fight their way into the playoff race, and losing to an unranked team in Cal, they dropped pretty far down. It's going to be tough for them to be able to catch back up, while Clemson only dropped to number 7. And like you mentioned, if they win out and do end up winning the ACC, there's a good chance that the college playoff committee will put them back in.
Yeah, I think just in general, in terms of how conferences will be represented in the college football playoff, that this season specifically, there's been there's been this general idea that the ACC champion is going to be there, no matter what, really, regardless of how anything really turns out in the ACC. There's probably going to be an ACC school in there. Not so much for the Pac-12. You can't exactly say the same for that conference. You're going to have to kind of earn your way in, and your resume will have to speak for itself over some other worthy teams to get in. So I think I agree with both of you in the sense. But for Washington State, it's got to be a devastating loss. I don't think anyone saw it coming. For me, it was almost like a fluke game. I don't know if you guys will agree with that, but I mean, Luke Falk, their quarterback, threw 5 interceptions, had just 2 through the first 6 games. Another thing to keep in mind, they didn't go on the road until last week, so 6 straight home games to start the season. Do you guys think any of that played a role in their loss last weekend?
Yeah, I think so. I think really anytime you turn the ball over 7 times in a game, that's not really putting together a winning formula. But yeah, I think you can look at it from the 5 home games. Yeah, that's a great way to start off the season, but that also really sets you up for a brutal second half. So I think going on the road for the first time, Cal being a bit of a sleeper team, I think that just all kind of, and being at Friday the 13th, it all kind of threw everything together for the perfect mixture for a huge upset. I didn't expect it to be 37-3. That really, the score just blew me away completely.
Yeah, it was definitely going to be tough for Washington State to go on the road for, I believe, their first time in the season. Yeah. Being able to play so well at home. But again, it's such a completely different atmosphere. Like I heard when they played USC, like it was so loud. Sometimes the USC, like they couldn't even like keep track of what down they were on. And it's great being the home team in that environment, but going on the road, it's a completely different story. And just they weren't able to experience that yet this season, and I think that really hurt them.
Yeah, and I think you get so comfortable because it's so rare that you don't go on the road until week 7 in a season that you kind of almost get comfortable and you get in this rhythm of every week not having to travel one bit, and then all of a sudden after 6 straight weeks of playing at home, you have to go on the road against a Pac-12 opponent who's not just going to sit down and lay an egg. They're going to give you all they got because to them that's their chance to kind of get themselves some national attention of their own. And I think Cal did a great job of that, but Washington State just did not look like themselves all on Friday night. I think the same could be said for Clemson. The bigger question mark in that game, guys, I'll ask both of you, should Kelly Bryant have started? We heard about the injury he had against Wake Forest last week. That certainly didn't help his mobility, and just that's kind of his biggest threat as a quarterback. So do you think Dabo made the right decision going to Kelly Bryant, or should he have looked at a backup?
Well, yeah, you said it. I mean, it really hurt the game in itself. Really, you start off the game hurt. That's not going to help you, and then you just get knocked out of the game. Period. Before the first half even ends. So that just sets them up for some hurt or for not really a great game. Offensive side of the ball, I think they could have made it work. It made it a lot harder that he was out. But defense, they really weren't that sharp on defense either. So while Kelly Bryant's injury hurt them, the defense didn't really do their job either. And give credit to Syracuse, they showed up and they played really well. They nearly led the entire game, it seemed like. So there's plenty of credit to go around, but some blame to go on the Clemson defense for sure.
Yeah, I would say it did hurt Clemson a bit. Kelly Bryant, he was questionable going in. He started. He didn't really do bad. He was 12 of 17 for 116 yards. So he was completing passes, and he didn't turn the ball over. But, again, he gets knocked out of because of a concussion. It wasn't his ankle, but still it knocks him out of the game. Kind of have to change you might have to change your offensive plan around. And then, like James mentioned, the defense for Clemson just did not hold up.
Yeah, I know that there's two completely different injuries, but I saw something on ESPN earlier today that it was talking about how that ankle injury, he still wasn't 100%, so he wasn't able to run, and at times that's what Kelly Bryant is best at, and he wasn't able to use that, and not only was he not able to use it when he tried to run, he just wasn't as good or as comfortable as he has been in the past, and that set him up for some really big hits. Obviously, the last one knocked him out of the game. But all in all, it's so fun to see upsets like that because it just kind of shows you anything can happen on any given day in college football. But at the same time, for Clemson, it's not a season ender by any stretch of the imagination. Like you guys have both said, if they run the table in the ACC and win the conference championship, you have to think they'll be as a top 4 seed and getting into that college football playoff.
And it's just especially great to see an upset like that when you're the number 6 team in the nation trying to move up. It's really helpful.
Yeah, especially when you've got a dog in the fight, a couple rankings down, trying to sneak your way in. Just like you said, Mitch. Those two Friday upsets certainly weren't the only major upsets of the weekend. We move on to some Saturday games. Number 5, Washington. A tough day for the Washington teams because the Huskies went on the road, took on Arizona State, and the Sun Devils won 13-7. Obviously, with the Washington State loss and now the Washington loss, there's no more undefeated teams in the Pac-12. That conference becomes wide open. I know it's still relatively early, but guys, who's your pick to win that conference right now?
Yeah, I think Washington, for me, is really the favorite right now in the Pac-12. Looking at the rest of their schedule, they get this weekend off, and 4 of their last 5 games are at home, including the Apple Cup in the last week of the season. USC has a tough test against Notre Dame this week. The back half of their schedule is relatively easy. I think USC is still vulnerable with Sam Darnold turning over the ball too much and much too often. But Washington's offense scared me a little bit on Saturday because they scored just 1 touchdown and were held to just 240 yards by a team that had given up at least 30 points a game before this week. I like the generosity of Washington's schedule. If it comes down to USC and Washington in the Pac-12 championship game, I think Washington will pull off the win.
Yeah, I was going to go with Washington as well. The game against Arizona State looked more like an SEC game. Was not a ton of offense and a lot of defense in that game. But Washington, their offense overall this season has been really solid. Their defense, they still only gave up 13 points. I think they're still looking good, and with not the toughest schedule going forward, I think Washington still has the best chance of winning the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Peterson, Washington head coach, said this would be UW's toughest game, and I don't think many people believed him when he said it, but boy, was he right, and does he know what he's talking about. For me, Mitch, you mentioned the defense. They've come a long way, especially losing 3 starters in the secondary from a year ago. They looked really good on Saturday night. The problem is the offense had pretty much an off night. Jake Browning, just 139 yards. That's his lowest yardage total since Colorado in the Pac-12 championship game, and Washington won that game 41-10, so he didn't have to pass the ball. Myles Gaskin, their star running back, held to just 67 yards, and Dante Pettis, who has elite speed on the outside at receiver, just 56 yards. If you can shut down the big three, those big three for Washington like Arizona State did on Saturday, this offense can be held in check. I know that's asking a lot, but I think Arizona State, similar to who was it we were talking about a couple weeks ago that the defense kind of gave some other teams a formula on how to stop a really good offense?
Oh man,
cannot remember.
You guys know what I'm talking about, though,
yes,
right?
Yes. Who was the blooper?
Anyway, it might come to us later in the show, but yeah, if you could shut those three guys down, which Arizona State did, you certainly have a chance. I think for me, the biggest thing, Washington misses Chico McClatcher. He was a slot receiver who is just really dynamic in that position. He broke his ankle versus Colorado earlier this season, out for the year. So they're a little light at receiver now outside of Dante Pettis. But we'll see as the season continues if Washington can kind of bounce back and make this a one-time thing and not linger on it as the year goes on. Guys, let's move on to an SEC game. What a surprise it was down in Baton Rouge. Unranked LSU welcomed number 10 Auburn, and I say the Tigers won. That doesn't tell you much. LSU won 27-23, coming back from a 16-point deficit about halfway through the second quarter. Auburn started off so well, but LSU, they turned it around, as have they done with their season after losing to Troy in homecoming. They've now gone on the road, beat a ranked Florida team, and now they beat number 10 Auburn. What's been the key to all of that for LSU?
I think for LSU, the players have really taken responsibility. The week after the loss to Troy, they held a players-only meeting, and I think that's really what sparked the turnaround for LSU. Orgeron told the players that they needed to take over. They needed to take ownership of this team, take ownership of this season, because if they don't watch out, they might not go to a bowl game. It could just fall that quickly, especially in the SEC. And ultimately what it comes down to is that the coaches can only do but so much. They can prepare the players as much as they can, but ultimately it's the players that make the plays on the field. And yeah, it sounds a little cliche, but really, I mean, that's what happened. So Duke Riley came in, a rookie linebacker with the Atlanta Falcons and former LSU Tiger, came in actually unannounced and talked to the team and really lit into them, Ed Orgeron said. And I think sparking that fire, giving them the big picture, hey, we only have 2 losses. Let's go 1 week at a time. And they take down Auburn at home. At home meaning Baton Rouge. So I think really just lighting that fire into the players for LSU really helped them and have gotten them to this point.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the players just at this point, they really had to take responsibility, and I think that loss at home to Troy on homecoming was also that helped lit a fire for them. They've just come out stronger than they have in previous games. It was a close game against Florida. That game was lost on an extra point kick, but coming out and beating the number 10 team, yeah, it was at home, but at home they lost to Troy, so. Overall, just for LSU, a great way of bouncing back and, like James mentioned, just taking responsibility for the past games.
Yeah, and one big thing, I think I can speak for all three of us when I say I don't think any of us thought LSU even had a chance in this game, because the way that Auburn offense have been playing the past couple weeks, they looked almost unstoppable. And LSU, I mean, yeah, you give up 23 points pretty early on, but you hold them scoreless for the last 33 game minutes in that one. That's really impressive and really tough to do against almost anybody, much less an Auburn offense that have been cooking on pretty much every level. They've just been so dynamic. It's put up so many points the past couple of weeks. Big thing for LSU, though, they get Darius Geis back, their star running back. He almost looks like he's 100%. I think that's huge for LSU. Kind of allows them to go back to their run first pro style offense with a true running back and a true horse and Darius Geis. I think that really helped LSU last weekend.
Yeah, especially their quarterback play has been a little inconsistent. Danny Etling is I mean, he's not a great quarterback. He's not going to take them to the national championship game. But if you can get consistency at that position, and then you add in Darius Geis, he's explosive, he's shifty. I mean, LSU could have really. They could turn the season around, end the season with 2 losses, and go to possibly a major bowl game. That's something not to hang your head over. And fans just 2 weeks ago were calling for Ed Orgeron's head. So I think he's really turned this team around, and the players have taken responsibility for every play they make.
A 10-2 would mean a win in Tuscaloosa in a couple weeks. So I don't know about that, but 9-3 doesn't sound too shabby with the way they started.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's move on to an ACC game. Number 11, Miami, stayed unbeaten, just barely getting past the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets 25-24. Another last-second win for Miami. That's 2 in 2 weeks. Now, are we going to talk about them as legitimate college football playoff contender?
I mean, I think they could be. I think you mentioned earlier, almost not guaranteed, but pretty likely that an ACC team can make the college football playoff. It depends, obviously, if they can win out or at least only escape the season with one loss. If they can lead the Coastal, the ACC Coastal, and then win the conference championship game at the end of the season, I think they could make the playoff.
I think Miami has a tough road ahead, and to be completely honest, I don't envision them going undefeated through the rest of the season. And really, I say that because I think if they were to go undefeated, then yes, they'll more than likely be in the college football playoff. But if they don't go undefeated, I think that really does not set them up for success, unless of course they beat Clemson in the ACC championship game. That's very possible, of course. But they lost Mark Walton. I guess it was last week. I think that they're going to find that hurts them a lot. And even though they got by without him this week, I think their luck is really going to run out at some point.
Yeah, big note in that game. Georgia Tech quarterback Taquan Marshall, who's the ACC's leading rusher, coming into last week, held to just 18 yards on 19 carries. The Miami defense is finally getting healthy, getting some big players, some key players back that were so important for them a year ago, and have a really good but young defense that's really starting to put it together. I think, if the offense can just put up enough points, Malik Rozier can do enough, that defense is going to take them a long way. I wouldn't be so quick to count them out. Oh, yeah.
And it does help that, they do have a couple big games coming up, Virginia Tech and Notre Dame in back-to-back weeks in November. I think for Miami it helps that both of those games are at home. They won't have to face the tough challenge on the road, especially at a place like Virginia Tech. But also, you do kind of have to watch out for this tomorrow. Syracuse comes to Miami. Obviously, Syracuse just beat Clemson. Could become just riding high off of that. Might not have the same result, but still got to watch out.
Don't count out Virginia either. They're 5-1. Bronco Mendenhall is doing miracles. It seems like in Charlottesville. They're not ranked, but I would look for them to be ranked, possibly by the end of the season, depending how their season goes. So, Mitch just talked about it. They do not have an easy road ahead, but luckily they get a lot of good games at home.
Yeah, and I think that's the knock against Miami is to this point, yeah, they're undefeated, but they haven't really been tested, haven't played exactly great opponents. They'll get that as the season continues. Seems like you always get a chance to really prove yourself. We'll see if Miami can live up to that. A good weekend for 12th-ranked Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry. They knocked off Texas by a score of 29-24, bouncing back from a loss against Iowa State last weekend. We know quarterback Baker Mayfield is good enough to lead this OU team, but guys, I think we saw at times begs the question: does he have the supporting cast around him to win out in the Big 12, which I think is what Oklahoma's going to have to do to probably make the college football playoff?
Well, Baker Mayfield relies a lot on tight end Mark Andrews, who against Texas had 4 receptions for 104 yards, really explosive. But there's no question that this Sooners team is going to need to step up to win the Big 12. 3 of their 4 next toughest games are at home. That one road game is at Oklahoma State, but there's no question that Baker Mayfield is going to have to spread the field a little bit if they're going to win out the Big 12. If you look at their win on paper to Ohio State, they have 3 players that had over 60 receiving yards. But in their loss to Iowa State, there's only 1 over 60 yards. And in their win over Texas, there were 3. So a little inconsistent, but Baker Mayfield knows how to spread his targets around, but when the defense doesn't give him much, then that's where the problems start for Baker Mayfield in the Sooner offense.
Yeah, like you mentioned, they really got to start spreading the ball around, finding some bigger targets than Andrews, a tight end. It's tough. Like Oklahoma, they seem to look really good against Ohio State. Ohio State didn't really look great in that game, but Oklahoma's been tested in almost every other game. They only won by 8 against Baylor. They lost at home to Iowa State, and then the Red River rivalry just barely escaped. But going forward, like I said, and like James said, a couple guys got to really step up on that Sooner offense besides Baker Mayfield for them to really have a good chance going forward.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about Oklahoma being tested, Mitch, I think I think the Baylor game is probably a fluke and a bit of an eye-opener for Oklahoma, considering Baylor hasn't won a game yet this year. But Iowa State's better than we thought, and certainly Texas continues to get better and better. It seems like they've found a quarterback in Sam Ehlinger, 278 passing yards and one passing touchdown and 110 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown last weekend against Oklahoma. He seems to be not just the starting quarterback of the offense, but the leader and their go-to guy, and he's really emerged at that despite being just a true freshman.
Yeah, Sam Ehlinger did a good job at stepping in when Shane Buechele went down. Obviously, he's not as good of a passer as Buechele. He did have 278 yards, but he was 19 of 39. A lot of incompletions, but he is much better. Mobley's much better on the ground. He had 110 yards. I think he's going to keep improving, and Texas obviously probably going to be counted out for the Big 12 championship, but they're going to be good going forward.
Let's stay in the Big 12 and move on to our last game to talk about from this past weekend. Number 24, Texas Tech, finally finding themselves in the polls, but it did not last long. They went on the road to take on West Virginia. The Mountaineers won 46-35. It was 35-17 Tech halfway through their third quarter. Was this more of a Texas Tech collapse, or were you more impressed with the West Virginia comeback, guys?
I'm not really sure I'd call this a collapse by Tech. I think that's a bit strongly worded, but they certainly didn't do enough defensively to put Will Greer away. It really was a fun game to watch. Both teams have big targets, and offensively this game just never stopped. And it seemed like every time we turned around, someone was scoring. But West Virginia just scored 22 in the fourth quarter, 22 unanswered for that matter, and that really does not explain the whole game. At one point, it's 35-17. The West Virginia offense is just so explosive, and the Tech defense has big holes, and pair those two together created a great opportunity for West Virginia to put the Red Raiders away in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, both of these offenses are really good. Shimanek and Will Greer are both solid quarterbacks, but again, Big 12 don't necessarily expect the best defenses, and I think that kind of showed. West Virginia, they ended up running a lot of plays, 41 passing attempts, 29 rushing attempts. I think, yes, they did score 22 unanswered, but I think at that point it could have just I think they did a good job at wearing down the already not so solid Texas Tech defense.
And I mean, you guys are talking about the defense. I think a collapse is more what I took as a collapse was more of a team collapse. We know this defense is going to give up points for Texas Tech. That's not exactly their strongest suit. But the offense didn't score in the last 24 game minutes against the West Virginia defense, who albeit is okay, but Texas Tech started out with 35 points in the first 2.5 quarters and then just could not score after that. I think that's more of a sense of a collapse than the defense giving up 29 unanswered. A couple other notes from this game. I'm still pretty high on West Virginia. I think they've got a really good team. David Sills, wide receiver, 6 catches, 89 yards, 3 touchdowns. His counterpart, Karan White, had 8 catches for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's probably the best wide receiver duo in college football, at least in my opinion. Will Greer, quarterback, starting to put it together. Jordan Crawford at running back is a solid piece. That defense, which is getting better and better. West Virginia's only 4-2, and that record's not exactly great, but they're a force to be reckoned with in the Big 12. Don't be surprised to see this team pull off a couple surprising upsets, whether it be against Oklahoma or Oklahoma State in the next couple of weeks, because I think they're a really good team. Yeah,
they have a really good chance at still being able to shake things up in the Big 12. Could end up hurting the Big 12 conference as a whole, but in terms of playoff talk, again, Will Greer's solid quarterback, have a great receiving core, but good chance at shaking up the conference.
I think what really helped them, especially in the last week against TCU, they got a couple of guys back on defense. We saw them stuff the run game, and Texas Tech is not known for their run game, but they still have a couple of guys that can break loose. So I think that really helps West Virginia getting some guys back. But overall, I totally agree with you, Ben, that they could be explosive and could easily upset Oklahoma State.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up for the first part of our segment. Before we go, I'll start with performance of the week from James.
Okay, so my performance of the week is Mackenzie Milton, who's the quarterback from Central Florida. The Golden Knights are averaging over 50 points a game, and while they've only played 5 games, they're in the American Conference, which is no walk in the park. 3 weeks ago, UCF held Memphis to just 13 points, and no team has scored more than 23 against them. This past week against East Carolina, Milton was 21 of 27 for 324 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't think he played the fourth quarter in that one, but regardless, he's averaging over 11 yards per completion. He has 15 touchdowns and 2 interceptions and thrown for nearly 1,500 yards, and he's just a sophomore. I really liked from what I've seen from Milton so far this season, but they've got a different task in Navy on the road in Annapolis this weekend.
For me, my performance of the week is the Syracuse offense against a Clemson team that previously hadn't allowed more than 21 points in a game. They had 440 total yards of offense, scored 27, obviously upset the number 2 team against a Clemson team who had only surrendered 21 points to the former Heisman winner Lamar Jackson. I think 14 of those coming in the fourth quarter. And Syracuse just did a great job at coming out strong and upsetting Clemson.
For me, it's LSU senior wide receiver DJ Chark. He had 5 catches for 150 yards and a big 75-yard punt return for a touchdown. Fueled LSU to a late comeback and upset of number 10, Auburn, like we talked about earlier. And LSU, for all the criticism they get and all this Ed Orgeron out that we hear all the time, they're 5-2. They go on the road to Ole Miss this weekend. I think they take care of business in that one. You go to 6-2. Then you make the trip up to Alabama. That's when we'll really find out just how far LSU has come from that homecoming loss to Troy. But DJ Chark, a big week and leading LSU Tigers to an upset of number 10, Auburn. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, there's one game from this past week in college football we haven't talked about yet. TCU went on the road to Manhattan and took care of business to improve to 6-0 on the season. We'll talk about that right after this.
I go to school with your children. We say the Pledge of Allegiance together. I'm one out of every 4 children in America, and I'm struggling with hunger. I'm lucky to grow up where I could be whatever I want. I want to grow up and be someone who doesn't go to bed hungry. Please visit feedingamerica.org today and find your local food bank. Every dollar you donate helps provide 7 meals for kids like me. Together, we're Feeding America. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Multiple sclerosis destroys connection, so it's only fitting that connection would be its greatest enemy, because connection takes away MS's ability to isolate, and as more connections form, we end up with more knowledge, more resources, more understanding, more ideas, and more hope. And then, the connections we make become more powerful than the connections MS destroys. MS kills connection. Connection kills MS. Give what you know at msconnection.org.
Welcome back to Friday Night Sports. TCU football improved to 6-0 this past weekend. They went on the road to Manhattan, beat the Kansas State Wildcats by a score of 26-6. Really took care of business. It was all in all a pretty easy, pretty simple win for TCU. They look really good. It's a place where the Horned Frogs have struggled in the past couple of years, but just went up to Manhattan this year, did their job, and left with a win. Yeah,
it was a good job for TCU. You know, like you mentioned. They haven't done the best. You know, they've struggled in the past in Manhattan. It's a good way of coming out after an initial 3-hour weather delay. You know, it's supposed to be an 11 o'clock game, didn't start till later in the afternoon, and had 1 or 2 more weather delays during the game. Super long game, but good job for TCU getting a 26-6 victory. Kenny Hill, again, solid performance, managing the game really well, and the defense really holding Kansas State to not much.
Yeah, the Friday the 13th antics certainly made me more anxious going into the Saturday morning turned afternoon matchup. But what stood out to me was K-State just looked lost without Jesse Ertz. He's their leader, and last year he ran all over the Horned Frogs defense last season at home, 170 yards on the ground alone just from him. And Alex Delton had to step up. He had to start, and he's talented. But this is his first start, and not an ideal situation for Bill Snyder's offense to be led by a freshman playing the 6th best team in the country. So really, really tough for K-State to rebound from that. But regardless, a good win from TCU. I know they're ready to get out of Manhattan.
And there's really two big stats I think this TCU team has prided itself on, and what good teams really pride themselves on the defense side of the ball. It's the red zone efficiency and how well you do when your opponents are in the red zone. Kansas State only had 2 appearances in the red zone, went 1 for 2 down there with a field goal. That's really good from the Horned Frogs. I thought that defensive line was outstanding, just frustrating, confusing, getting after Alex Delton, making it a long day for the sophomore QB, making his first collegiate start. And then on the offensive side of the ball, third down conversions, TCU came into the week number 1 in the FBS in that department, 9 of 18 against Kansas State last weekend on third down. They were really good. I think a lot of that you have to credit to Kenny Hill. He looked really good, and he's just very comfortable in third down situations. Does a great job of getting TCU in the right checks.
Yeah, you said it. He looks very, very comfortable in almost any situation. Give it first down or fourth down. They really controlled the clock. They held the ball for almost 32 minutes. Didn't try to do too much, and they really stuck with what they knew. K-State was pretty good at handling the run, but Kenny Hill, 297 yards through the air, second highest total this season. Week by week, we like what we're seeing from Kenny Hill. I know people last year and even at the beginning of this year, people were quick to jump on the Kenny Hill hate bandwagon, especially when he throws an interception. So just got to give him some time. Really like what I'm seeing, and it's going to be crucial coming down the stretch, especially in November. Got a tough month ahead and the rest of October, but really like what I'm seeing from him.
Yeah, Kenny Hill's just been looking better and better each week, being more comfortable, still keeping defense on their toes. He's been able to run. He's able to escape the pocket if he feels pressure. He's doing better this year at still looking for a possible open receiver, and he's still spreading the ball out really well. 9 different receivers had a catch against Kansas State. Is just really good job at keeping the defense guessing where he's going to go.
Yeah, we talked about Kenny Hill for a little bit. Let's move over to the running back department. Kyle Hicks had a season-high 16 carries. He finally looks healthy, and it looks like Sonny Cumbie's just, I don't know, maybe it was just the nature of the game, maybe something to do with Darius Anderson that we don't know about, but it looks like Sonny Cumbie's just giving him back that starting job. Kyle Hicks wasn't outstanding, but certainly looks like a workhorse back that he looked like a year ago.
Well, I think, Darius Anderson, of course, impressed, but I think the TCU coordinators and the coaches know that Darius Anderson's going to have his time to come. He'll get there. He's going to be one heck of a player. We know it. But you got to rely on Kyle Hicks, too. He's got the experience. He's still a good player, even though he came into the season injured. So rely on his experience and his ability. And he's taken him this far, and he's not trying to do too much either. He's just doing just enough, it seems like. When there are some games, he's more of a receiving back, and there are other games when he is just straight up the middle, being that shifty running back. So the how they use Kyle Hicks is it's different each week almost. It just depends on the matchup.
Tough to plan for too.
Yes, very.
Yeah, and I think Kyle Hicks, being what seemingly almost pretty much fully healthy. Looked pretty similar to how he was last year. Obviously, he only had 58 yards on the ground. Didn't have too much, but also had 5 catches out of the backfield for 50 yards. Really seeing, because he was our leading receiver last year, really getting that mixing in rushing and receiving, and then continuing with the TCU rushing offense. Yeah, Darius Anderson. He did have 2 carries for 5 yards. Some of it probably has to do with Kyle Hicks being back and healthy. Some could have had to do with, after he fumbled the ball, I don't think he saw the field again. Some with that. And then Sewell Onalua.
Oh, he took my point.
I'll let you go with that, Ben.
Sewell and I was going to say, we've talked about Anderson and Hicks. Let's give some love to another sophomore. I guess Hicks is a senior, but Darius Anderson, Sewell Onalua, a couple sophomores. Onalua only 5 carries for 8 yards, but 2 touchdowns on the goal line out of the Wildcat. Those aren't great numbers outside of the touchdown runs, but they're so important. It's just such a big plus to have a guy like Onalua who can give you that, out of the goal line, because in these situations, in those kind of goal-to-go situations, field goals are wins for the defense. And spread offenses kind of have been known to struggle within 5 yards because they don't exactly have the beef or, the power or strength to just will their way in. And it's tough to kind of nickel and dime your way through 5 yards for a touchdown. That's kind of how spread offenses matriculate down the field. So I think having a guy like Olana Lua who can just, let Kenny Hill go out on the outside, block if he wants, but just snap the ball to Olana Lua, let him use his strength and power and size, get behind that big offensive line. It's such a big plus because really helps out that offense finish drives.
Yeah, we've really seen that the Wildcat incorporated a lot this year. Saw it against Arkansas, against West Virginia, got a crucial touchdown there, and then again 2 touchdowns this past Saturday against Kansas State. Really utilizing his size, 6'2", 6'3", 220 pounds. He's tough to stop even when they know it's coming.
Yeah, it's just I can't say it enough. Such a big plus for the Horned Frogs. I think we all have kind of talked about it a little bit. The offensive wasn't great. It wasn't eye opening or surprising, but they were good enough, and that defense looks really good. Horned Frogs take on the other team from the state of Kansas, the Kansas Jayhawks. They welcome them to Fort Worth as they look to improve to 7-0. We'll preview that one in a little bit. But guys, let's move on to some MLB postseason talk. I'll start in the ALCS. New York leads Houston 3-2. The Astros took the first 2 in Houston. The Yankees responded with the 3 at home in New York in the middle of the series. They now get ready to go back to Houston. I guess I'll ask James, what's going to be the key for New York to get a win on the road in Houston?
Well, they faced Justin Verlander in Game 2. They face him again tonight, and you gotta attack him early. When he got in a groove, he went 9 innings. He gave the Astros exactly what they needed. But for the Yankees, they've just got to keep this offense going. They know they're probably not going to get a lot of runs the first time through the order. But when you see Justin Verlander once, you get an idea of what he's throwing. It helped you see him in Game 2. They solved the Dallas Keuchel puzzle that they couldn't figure out in Game 1. Keuchel is still yet to give up a home run to the Yankees in his career, but his ERA did jump a little bit. So I think just going in to this game tonight, the Yankees have just got to keep the offense going. And on the pitching side, they've done the starters have done very well. I was shocked by Masahiro Tanaka. He came into the postseason 13-13 record. And that pretty much explains what his season was: up and down, inconsistent. But he just turned it on when it came into the postseason. So the Yankees, they're rolling ahead of steam. They won the wild card. They lost the first 2 to Cleveland, win 3 in a row. Lost the first 2 to Houston. Could they win 4 in a row? It could be. We'll have to see.
Yeah, the Yankees coming off high after 3 wins, all at home. Astros won their 2 at home. It's going to be really tough for the Yankees offense. Not everyone is young, but they got a couple young guys on the team. Really got to make Justin Verlander work. Like James mentioned, went 9 innings. His first start in the ALCS against the Yankees. Got to get to it. If you can't get to him early, at least make him work. Get him tired. Get to the bullpen. Just anything to help get a dominant postseason starter out of the game.
And I think you said it best, Mitch, is the Yankees' motto has to be get to that bullpen. Going into the postseason, they had an ERA above 4, and we saw it, was it Game 5? Was the collapse, I believe.
Yeah. Was it 4-0 Houston?
Yes, it was 4-0 in the 7th. Yankees scored 6 unanswered, and that's game over at that point because the Yankees' bullpen is pretty rock solid. So that's got to be their motto, but just keep doing what they've been doing. Ride this high that they won in New York and take it all the way. And
I want to flip sides a little bit. Talk about the New York pitching. They'll go to Luis Severino tonight, and I think Severino is a guy who had a really good regular season. Kind of turned a lot of attention his way with how good he had been. He struggled a little bit in the postseason, but it's going to be really interesting to see how he fares against this Houston offense, who is so dynamic, so good, so talented, so deep, but yet in this series, they have not been that good. They're averaging less than 2 runs per game in the series, as a matter of fact. And outside of really Carlos Correa and Jose Altuve, they're Houston's middle infield, the rest of the guys in that lineup have not hit all that well. They're going to need a little bit more lineup depth if Houston's gonna move on to the World Series. Obviously, needing 2 wins in these next 2 games.
Yeah, Luis Severino just brings a lot of power stuff. He's got some power breaking balls. He brings a high heater in the fastball. So I think that really his wild card game was pretty ugly. His game 2 start was not that bad, but he's gotten this time off. He kind of knows what to expect, and you said it best that other than Altuve and George Springer and Carlos Correa, the rest of the team is batting, I think, under 100. So he really should not have to worry about the rest of that lineup. Can't sleep on them by any means because they're at home, but you gotta get. I think Altuve has really cooled down this ALCS since the first 2 home games, but can't sleep on him at all.
And with Severino, he's really got to work on getting deep into the game. In 3 games this postseason, he's only had 11 1/3 innings. Hasn't been able to go deep. Teams have been getting to him early. He's got to bear down, try and get through the order, a couple times. Altuve's been solid. Correa's good. Yulieski Gurriel, he's batting like 380 this postseason. So, yeah, some of the Houston offense hasn't done that well, especially this ALCS, but definitely can't sleep on him.
Yeah, absolutely not. I think this is the highest scoring team in the AL and second in home runs behind, obviously, the New York Yankees. And a big reason for that, Aaron Judge had some key hits down in the Bronx in these past 3 games. He looks like he's kind of started to pick it up after a slow start to the postseason.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of guys were getting on the Aaron Judge hate train because he was just not hitting home runs anymore. What happened to him? But these last few games, going back to New York, helped him a lot. And we saw that in the Cleveland series as well. But and he can do it all. He proved it in Game 4, I believe, when he had the home run, or he had the catch against the wall, and then he dove for a fly ball later in the game. So they're turning this offense on at the right time. You always want to transition, get the offense going later in the series, maybe, depending how much you're down. And as for the Yankees, it's really worked out for them.
And while Judge hasn't done great the whole series, he is only batting 200 this postseason, but he has been coming up clutch. He does have 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, most of those coming at home in crucial spots.
Give some love to Greg Bird and Gary Sanchez. Those guys are also mashing, and Greg Bird, I think, might have the best eye on the Yankees. Apparently, to some of the coaches, when they go look at film and he does not swing at a called strike that's outside, he's usually right. So Greg Bird's really battled some injuries this year in the past couple of years, but the baby bombers, they're coming. And people told them they weren't even supposed to peak this year, so they are ahead of schedule.
Yeah, certainly a bright future for New York. It'll be interesting to see how the ALCS fares out, but we do know who will be representing the NL after the Los Angeles Dodgers beat Chicago 4-1 in the series. Dodgers won 11-1 last night behind a huge night from Kike Hernandez. I'll let Mitch take this one.
Oh, yeah, Game 5, sorry. Dodgers really looking forward to, getting that World Series spot since first time since 1988. Now I saw something on Twitter from Joe Davis, the Dodgers regular season broadcaster. Last year at around this time, like around October postseason, Kike Hernandez, his dad, started battling cancer. So really tough off the field issues for Kike Hernandez. Really started to struggle. And then what a moment last night. Kike Hernandez, his dad at the stadium, cancer free. Hits 3 home runs, including a grand slam, to really just open the doors for that Dodgers offense.
And people say they don't like sports. How could you not like that? Such an awesome story, but getting back to the baseball side of things, this Dodgers first 5 in the lineup is so tough to get through. Chris Taylor's having quite the turnaround season, almost coming out of nowhere, essentially. Justin Turner, another guy who's put up, I think he leads the NL in batting average, if I'm correct.
He was up there for sure.
He's up there, top three at the worst.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, and then you got Cody Bellinger, Yasiel Puig, who's having a good postseason. You can add Corey Seager to that list when healthy. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he's not healthy due to a back injury right now, but when he is healthy, that first five is so tough to get through for any opposing pitcher.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if the Dodgers are going to want Corey Seager back. They got Charlie Culberson, and he batted .455 in the postseason, so he's filling in very nicely. I know he's been up and down in the system the past couple of years, but he's making his time in L.A. definitely worth it.
Yeah, a lot of guys for the Dodgers coming up clutch. And then going back to Justin Turner, has just been putting on an absolute tear this postseason, batting over 400, 12 RBIs. I think now... he has the highest postseason career on base percentage in a minimum of 100 plate appearances, topping Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth. So pretty impressive on that stat.
Yeah, and the rotation for Los Angeles, while having some big names and some really good regular seasons, they haven't been outstanding this postseason, but they've got the job done. Clayton Kershaw, Yu Darvish, Alex Wood is a good top three in the rotation. Obviously, Alex Wood has had a great first half of the season. I think he's kind of let off a little bit here in the back half and even into the postseason. But you combine those three with Kenley Jansen, the back end of the bullpen, who is lights out. It seems like if you get the ball to Jansen in the ninth inning, it's game over. He's just been so good, and I think that's been a key that doesn't really get talked about as much for the Dodgers.
Well, the Dodgers starters, they were never allowed the Cubs to score more than 3 runs against them. So I think you can look at that aspect and say, hey, if we're the Dodgers and we can get 6 innings out of our starters, we can get the rest of the innings. If need be, we'll get 6 outs from Kenley Jansen. Not ideal, but doable. And the Cubs, they've got a pretty good offense. We talked about their bullpen last week, very vulnerable, and we saw that this series. But nobody really stepped up for the Cubs this postseason like we saw last year. But this Cubs, the starting 5 is good all around. They're a young team, and the Dodgers are here to stay for a long time.
Yeah, a couple teams that will be back, I think, undoubtedly. Chicago's still got a pretty young core.
Yeah, and I was going to mention one more thing about the Dodgers bullpen. Kenta Maeda started the season as a starting pitcher, put him in the bullpen, and he's been, especially this postseason, absolutely lights out. He's pitched in 4 games, has 2 wins, 4 innings pitched, 5 strikeouts, no hits or walks. Has been a really good shutdown guy coming out of the bullpen for the Dodgers, leading into most likely, Kenley Jansen that late in the game.
Yeah, L.A. cruised to a World Series appearance this year with a 7-1 record thus far in the postseason. We'll see who they face off in the AL, but things are looking bright for the Dodgers, just 4 wins away from a World Series title. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get back to some college football. TCU, like I said earlier, welcomes Kansas to town. We'll preview that one for you right after this.
5 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease. And another 16 million husbands, wives, children, and friends are caregivers. But the right foods may help you prevent it. Vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, the same foods that fight diabetes and heart disease can also keep your brain strong and memory sharp. Let's eat right to fight Alzheimer's. Visit eattofightalzheimers.org.
Are you or a loved one unable to lead a healthy lifestyle because your physical ailments prohibit you from making nutritious meals for yourself? Do you find that you eat out for every meal because it's too difficult to cook? Well, get excited, because you can kiss fast food goodbye. Meals on Wheels delivers nutritionally balanced meals to the elderly and disabled citizens of Tarrant County. Wait, it gets even better. Each meal is made with love because each client gets their own professional case manager who prepares meals and recipes that specifically meet each client's personal health needs. You're probably thinking to yourself, this sounds great, but what's the catch? I'm here to tell you that there is no catch. Eligibility for these meal services are based on need. Help and health are just a few clicks away. For more information, call 817-336-0912. From there, a case manager will set up a time for a home visit and assessment. You're on your way to healthy living. For Meals on Wheels, call 817-336-0912.
Welcome back to Friday Night Sports. 6-0 TCU Horned Frogs welcome the 1-5 Kansas Jayhawks to town this weekend. Gary Patterson, Kenny Hill have emphasized all week they won't overlook Kansas, so TCU should be well on their way to a 7-0 record, right, guys?
I would hope so. Kansas, have not done well. They got Doug Meacham, our co-offensive coordinator from last year, to try and lead them. Hasn't really turned out as well for them. Obviously, they just don't have the caliber of players like other schools do. But overall, Kansas has really struggled. But always got to be careful with these games.
Well, since TCU joined the Big 12 in 2012, they've won all of their matchups against the Jayhawks, but each game has been decided by 14 points or less. I know last year was much too close for comfort in Lawrence, but really, I don't see that happening again this year.
Yeah, I mean, this Kansas defense isn't exactly very good, are they? Giving up 40-plus points in every game except their season opener against Southeast Missouri, which is Kansas' lone win of the season. Since 2014, the Jayhawks are 6-36. Half of those wins have been against SEC or FCS schools in their season opener. SEC schools, that would be quite impressive, wouldn't it? But, hey, one guy to keep an eye on for your TCU is Kansas running back Khalil Herbert, who had 291 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns against West Virginia earlier this year. A game Kansas lost, but Herbert had an outstanding game, a career high in rushing yards. He is going to be a game-time decision, so he more than likely won't be 100%. If he can't go, that's obviously huge for TCU. If he does go, you got to key Herbert, make Kansas beat you through the air. I think TCU should be able to do that. It has blowout written all over it, at least in my opinion, guys. I'm not so sure. I don't know. The last 2 years, TCU has struggled against Kansas. Seems like Kansas always plays them pretty well. I'll take the Horned Frogs, but it'll be closer than people think. Maybe Horned Frogs by about 10 or 11.
Yeah, this is pretty much the definition of a trap game for TCU. Can't take anything lightly, of course. You mentioned, Kansas have a decent running game, but TCU has overall in the season has been very good at shutting down the run. And against Iowa State, Kansas quarterbacks Carter Stanley and Peyton Bender combined to connect on just 11 of 26 passes for 44 yards and an interception. Not saying that they'll do that as bad as they did against Iowa State, but looking good for TCU. I wouldn't say complete blowout, but I've got TCU by 2 touchdowns, at least.
Yeah, key for Kansas really have to get their passing game going. They couldn't do it at all against Iowa State last week. Peyton Bender was just held to 18 yards in 19 attempts. But Bender's shown some life, averaging over 343 yards passing in his first 3 games. Kansas has been very solid in the red zone, despite being there just 20 times in their first 6 games. They have a 95% success rate and no turnovers. So I don't think this is going to be a blowout like many people think. TCU owns the fourth quarter. I think they'll pull away late. But I would say 2 touchdowns max, TCU wins.
All right, and on that note, we'll move on to our college football Week 8 pick'em. Quick rundown of the standings. Mitch still topped the leaderboards with a record of 24-11. I'm in second with a record of 23-12, and James is in third, but just a game off first, or 2 games off first and a game off second with a record of 22-13. I'll start with another American Conference matchup that looks to be a pretty fun one. 20th ranked UCF goes on the road, takes on Navy. A tough 2 weeks for Navy. They lost at home against Memphis last weekend, but the Golden Knights are 5-0 to start 2017. They're the highest scoring team in college football. Any chance Navy pulls off the upset?
Remember last year when Navy upset number 6 Houston? I think there's a possibility this weekend for sure. Last week, I thought Navy had a shot to beat Memphis on the road, and they really did keep up for most of the game, made it interesting late. But UCF held Memphis to just 13 points, and this UCF offense is explosive. These 2 teams have never played each other, and I think there'll be a lot of offense to go around. Navy normally can make a few passes through the air, but Zach Abey was 0 for last week with 2 interceptions. I think because of the lack of the few passing plays that Navy can sometimes pull off, that's going to be the difference in the end. I think UCF will come away from Annapolis for their first 6-0 start.
For me, I think UCF, they average over 50 just over 50 points a game. Their offense is so explosive. It'll be definitely. It's always going to be a tough going on the road. But I've got UCF and the Knights over Navy in this one.
Yeah, last week in the Memphis-Navy game, I said the Navy offense can't keep up with this Memphis spread offense. I think the same goes for the the midshipmen this weekend when they take on UCF. That offense, like you guys have both said, is really good. I think just it'll be a high-scoring game, like James said. I just think UCF's offense is too much for Navy. Let's move on to a pretty intriguing SEC matchup I mentioned earlier in the show. Number 24 LSU finds themselves back in the top 25 polls. They go on the road and take on an Ole Miss team. LSU's coming off consecutive wins over top 25 teams. Like I said, they're now back in the polls. A trip to Oxford and Ole Miss this weekend. Can the Tigers make it 3 in a row?
LSU has been on a roll, and I think they will make it 3 in a row. Shea Patterson has been about the only bright spot on Ole Miss, and their offense has been spectacular in wins, but non-existent in losses. Tag that 66-3 loss at Alabama. So if LSU can shut down Shea Patterson, I think the Tigers go into Oxford, win the ball game. LSU's defense has been great the past couple of weeks, especially last week when they shut down the Auburn offense, holding them to 55 yards in the second half. Darius Geis is healthy, the healthiest he's been in weeks, according to Ed Orgeron. I like a big LSU win at Ole Miss.
I think Darius Geis being back for LSU is going to be a huge difference in this game. Yeah, Shea Patterson has passed for over 2,000 yards this year. But like James mentioned, going back to the Alabama game, when they're down, it seems like Ole Miss, they seem to just kind of give up on the game. And so with that being said, I've got the LSU Tigers over Ole Miss.
A big thing for LSU season is kind of in their ability to bounce back from a tough loss. Ole Miss is kind of playing LSU's role now with a lot of criticism going around in that program. I think in that sense, Ole Miss will respond. Shea Patterson's a really good quarterback, like Mitch said, over 2,000 passing yards, 17 touchdowns to go along with that. I think it's closer than people think, but LSU will win. Let's move on to a pretty big top 25 matchup. The 13th ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish gets ever a grueling back half of the season by welcoming the 6-1 USC Trojans to town. Guys, who wins?
As much as USC was hyped going into the season, I think they were a bit overrated. This will likely be their last matchup against a ranked team, and they seem to have a paved road to the Pac-12 championship game. On the other side of the ball, Notre Dame also came into the season overrated, but they've come back after a 1-point loss to now third-ranked Georgia. Notre Dame's pass defense has been stellar, and they rely heavily on the run game to get their offense going. I don't see USC as a great run-stopping team. It's in South Bend, which no question helps the Irish. If their pass defense is so good, I think it really causes fits for Sam Darnold. I like Notre Dame for the home win.
Yeah, Notre Dame this season, their defense especially has been so good. They haven't allowed more than 20 points in a game, and that was to Georgia, again, now number 3 in the national rankings. USC, while they have been able to win some games, they haven't looked, at least to me, as impressive as people thought they were going to be, and I've got the Irish at home.
Well, I will take the USC Trojans then. I just think Sam Darnold is good enough to get the job done. Notre Dame's offense is so one-dimensional. It's almost kind of funny. If you could stop the run, stop Jamal Adams, who's a really good running back in fairness, but if I just think USC is going to load the box, make Notre Dame beat them through the air with Brandon Wimbush, who hasn't proven himself to this point. That 13th ranking for Notre Dame is a lie, in my opinion. It's deceptive. I don't think they're that good. It won't last long. I got USC. Let's move on to a late night Pac-12 after dark, if you will, college football game. Number 15, Washington State welcomes unranked Colorado to town. Cougars obviously stunned last week by Cal on the road. They're back home this weekend, but this Buffalo team, in my opinion at least, has quite the backfield duo. QB Steven Montez, running back Philip Lindsay are both really good players. Can Wazoo rebound from last week's shocking upset?
You mentioned Philip Lindsay. He averages over 144 yards a game, which is unreal. When Washington State played Oregon, Ducks running back Royce Freeman said, Washington State's run defense, they did their homework. We needed to be more aggressive. There's no question that Colorado will be aggressive in the run game. That doesn't mean they can sleep on Steven Montez, who's not afraid to throw the ball deep. The Cougars are coming home, though, and after a tough loss at Cal, the crowd in Pullman is going to be loud. I'm going to take the Cougars at home.
I was... at the beginning, when I first saw this matchup, I was leaning a bit more towards Colorado, but with Washington State being back home, yeah, they came off a very tough loss on the road against Cal, but being at home in Pullman, Washington State, I think it's going to be a close game, but I've got Wazoo.
Yeah, you guys both pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. Washington State's perfect 6-0 at home so far this year. I think they'll make it 7-0. I got Wazoo. And finally, the college game day matchup, prime time on ABC. Second-ranked Penn State welcomes 19th-ranked Michigan to town. It's first of a trio of big games for the Penn State Nittany Lions. Saquon Barkley, their running back, is likely the Heisman frontrunner, but he could really help his case with a big night tomorrow. Can he and this Penn State team get the job done against the Wolverines?
Yeah, opponents have reached the end zone just 10 times against Penn State this year, and the Nittany Lions have not faced a top 90 rush offense all season. And Michigan will be relying on the run game a lot with the lack of trust in John O'Korn. So big, really first test, I think, this season for Saquon Barkley. I think there are too many ifs on this Michigan team. If Michigan can create turnovers, if John O'Korn can make things happen through the air, if the Wolverines can stop Saquon Barkley, I don't think this game will be really all that close, especially with it being in Happy Valley. Big win at home for Penn State.
Yeah, Michigan, they just haven't looked all that solid this season. Really struggling in the passing game with both Wilton Speight and John O'Korn. They're going to have to rely on not that much for their offense. I think with Penn State at home in Happy Valley, Saquon Barkley will lead the way, and Penn State will get the win.
Yeah, I think Penn State quarterback Trace McSorley is set for a big night. This is a guy who is a true gunslinger. Penn State loves just the vertical passing game to counter Saquon Barkley's running. And Michigan already loves to run a lot of man coverage. They don't play a lot of safety help. They trust their corners on islands a lot. Penn State's got a bunch of good receivers, especially a bunch of really good vertical downfield receivers. Michigan's going to have to obviously load the box to contain Saquon Barkley. I think that bodes well for this Penn State offense, set up the play-action game. Trace McSorley, I think he's set for a big night, like I said. And like James said, I don't think it's going to be that close. I'm not that high on this Michigan team. I think Penn State's also really good and a lot deeper than just Saquon Barkley. They've got, Trace McSorley, like I've said, good wide receivers, a great tight end to Mike Gesicki, a good defense that doesn't get talked about all that much. I think Penn State is really good. It's going to be a tough trio of games. They get Michigan State the following week, and then Ohio State the week after that. So it's going to be tough, but I think they'll take care of business this week against the Wolverines. That's going to do it for us here on Friday Night Sports. For James Flowers and Mitchell Lefebvre, I'm Ben Otten. Thanks for tuning in tonight. If you missed anything from tonight's show, you can find us on Facebook. Page name is Friday Night Sports, or on Twitter at Friday Night Sports. That's FRINIGHTSPORTS. You'll have a good weekend, and we'll see you back here next Friday at 6. Good night, everyone.